The mountains of Kunar have always been a place of mystery, their jagged peaks rising like silent sentinels over the rugged landscape. To the people who live there, the land is more than just rock and forest. It holds stories, legends whispered from one generation to the next. Some of these tales are meant to teach lessons, others to warn. But there is one story in particular that makes even the bravest villagers lower their voices and glance over their shoulders when they speak of it. A story about something unnatural, something that watches from the shadows, something with red eyes. It started with a soldier, a man named Rafik, stationed at a remote outpost deep in the valley. He wasn't the kind to believe in myths. A practical man, hardened by years of service, he had heard all the stories. The jinns that roamed the forests at night, the strange lights that flickered in the mountains, the spirits that called out to travelers only to lead them to their doom. But he always laughed them off. Fear makes people imagine things, he used to say. Out here, the only real danger is what you can see. Then one night he saw something he could not explain. It was past midnight when the first sound came. A deep, distant rumble like rocks shifting, but somehow deliberate. Rafik stood outside his small post, rifle slung over his shoulder, listening. The night was quiet, too quiet. The usual rustling of the wind through the trees had vanished. The insects had gone silent. Even the stray dog that often lingered near the camp was nowhere to be seen. Then he saw them, two glowing red dots in the darkness. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a wolf or a reflection from some distant light. But as he stepped forward, his heart began to race. The eyes were too high off the ground. Way too high. Whatever it was standing upright, towering above the trees. And it was watching him. Rafik took a cautious step back, gripping his rifle. His mind fought against what his eyes were telling him. No creature should be that big. No living thing should have eyes that burned like fire. He felt the weight of something unseen pressing down on him, an overwhelming sense of dread clawing at his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But soldiers don't run from shadows. Then the figure moved. It wasn't just tall, it was massive. Broad shoulders, limbs as thick as tree trunks. It stepped forward, and Rafik heard the ground groan beneath its weight. He raised his weapon, heart hammering against his ribs, but something inside him told him it wouldn't matter. Bullets wouldn't stop this. Nothing would. Then, in a voice that was neither human nor beast, it spoke. And in that moment Rafik realized. He was not meant to hear those words. He didn't remember running, only the sheer terror that gripped him as he fled through the darkness. His feet barely touching the earth. Behind him, the trees trembled. The air itself seemed to shudder. But he didn't dare look back. The next morning when his fellow soldiers found him, he was shaking, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with something beyond fear. He couldn't speak for hours. And when he finally did, all he said was, "If you see it. If you see the red eyes, run." The villagers say he was never the same after that night. Others who ventured too deep into the forests of Kunar spoke of strange whispers, of shadows moving where no shadows should be. Some disappeared without a trace. And if you listen closely, even now in the dead of night you might hear it, the sound of something massive shifting in the mountains. Watching. Waiting. So if you ever find yourself in Kunar and the forest falls silent, if you see two burning red eyes staring at you from the dark, don't think. Don't hesitate. Just run. The story of the red-eyed giant spread quickly through the villages, passed in hushed voices over crackling fires and among travelers making their way through the valleys. Some dismissed it as a soldier's nightmare, a hallucination born from exhaustion and isolation. Others weren't so sure. In a place like Kunar, where the mountains held secrets older than memory, where entire villages vanished into the mist without explanation, it was never wise to ignore the warnings of those who had seen something they were not meant to see. Among those who took the tale seriously was an old man named Hamid. He had lived in these mountains for over 70 years, long enough to know that some stories weren't just stories. His father had once spoken of strange things that lurked beyond the forests, things that were neither human nor beast, things that belonged to the land before men did. He had always believed these were just the tales of an old man trying to frighten his children, until now. One evening, as he sat outside his small stone house, staring at the horizon where the mountains swallowed the last traces of sunlight, a traveler arrived at his door. The man was young, dressed in worn-out clothes, his face marked with exhaustion and fear. His name was Bilal, a merchant who had been making his way through the valleys, trading goods between villages. But tonight he was not a merchant. Tonight he was a man running from something he could not explain. Hamid invited him in, offering him tea and a place to rest. It wasn't until the flames of the lantern cast long shadows on the walls that Bilal finally spoke. His voice was low, unsteady. "I saw it," he whispered. "The thing with red eyes." Hamid's fingers tightened around his cup. He did not interrupt, did not tell the man he was imagining things. Instead he listened. Bilal had been traveling through the lower valleys when night fell. He had planned to reach the next village before dark, but the winding paths and unpredictable weather had slowed him down. By the time he realized he was alone in the wilderness, the sky had turned black, and the cold wind carried an eerie stillness. Then came the sound, a deep, guttural breath, like something massive exhaling just beyond the trees. At first, Bilal thought it was an animal, perhaps a bear moving through the brush. But as he turned, he saw it. At the edge of the forest, where the moon barely touched the ground, stood a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. It was enormous, its body blending into the darkness except for its eyes, two burning red orbs staring directly at him. The air grew heavy, thick with something unexplainable, something that made his skin crawl. Bilal had been in dangerous situations before. He had dealt with thieves, wild animals, even the harsh winters of the mountains. But nothing had ever paralyzed him with fear like this. His body refused to move. His mind screamed for him to run, but it was as if something held him in place. Then, just like with the soldier, it spoke. The voice was not human. It was low, echoing in a way that made it feel as if it were inside his head rather than coming from the creature itself. The words were in no language he recognized, yet he understood their meaning perfectly. "You were not supposed to see me." That was when his body finally obeyed his instincts. He turned and ran, stumbling over rocks and roots, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't stop, didn't look back, not even when he felt the earth tremble beneath him. It was only when he reached the lights of a distant village that he collapsed, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. When Bilal finished speaking, silence filled the small room. Hamid watched the flickering flame of the lantern, his mind turning over the words he had just heard. If it had been only one person claiming to see the red-eyed giant, he might have doubted it. But now there were two, and Hamid knew there would be more. In the following weeks, the stories continued. A shepherd claimed he had found his flock scattered in terror one morning, though there had been no sign of a predator. A group of travelers swore they had seen something move in the distance, something too large to be a man but too silent to be an animal. An old woman in a village near the river insisted she had heard strange whispers coming from the trees at night, though when she stepped outside, there was nothing there. The fear grew, spreading like wildfire through the valleys. People stopped traveling after dark. Villagers locked their doors earlier, whispering prayers before they slept. The mountains, once familiar and steady, now felt like they were watching. But not everyone was afraid. In another village, far deeper in the mountains, there was a man named Farid. He was young, bold, and reckless, the kind of person who had never learned to fear what he could not see. When he heard the stories, he laughed. "It's just a trick of the mind," he told his friends. "The dark plays games with you." But when he heard that people were too afraid to go into the woods, that entire areas were now being avoided because of some ghost story, his curiosity got the better of him. He didn't believe in creatures, in legends, in warnings passed down through whispers. So one night he decided to prove everyone wrong. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a knife, he set off toward the forest where the red-eyed giant had been seen. The air was cool, the leaves rustling softly as he moved between the trees. For the first hour nothing happened. Just the sounds of the wilderness, the occasional hoot of an owl, the distant call of a jackal. Then the silence came. The wind stopped. The leaves stopped rustling. Even the insects fell into an unnatural stillness. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Farid frowned, glancing around. His flashlight flickered, though the batteries were fresh. A strange chill ran down his spine. Then he saw them. 2 glowing red eyes, staring at him from the darkness. His breath caught in his throat. His legs refused to move. He had laughed at the stories, dismissed the warnings, but now, standing there, he understood. This was not a trick of the mind. This was real. And then, just like before, it spoke. The voice wrapped around him like a cold wind, pressing into his bones. The words made no sense, yet he understood them. A warning, threat, promise. Then the ground beneath him shifted. A shadow moved. Something enormous, something not bound by the rules of the world he knew. And in that moment, Farid realized something terrible. The red-eyed giant was not alone, and he was not going to make it back. Farid never returned. For days, the villagers waited, hoping he would come stumbling out of the forest with that same cocky grin, ready to boast about how he had seen nothing and proved everyone wrong. But as time stretched on, hope turned to fear. A small group of men, armed with torches and rifles, went searching for him. They scoured the paths he was last seen walking, calling his name into the silent woods. The only answer was the wind shifting through the trees. Then they found his flashlight. It lay at the base of an old oak, its glass cracked, the batteries drained. Nearby, the ground was disturbed, as if something massive had moved through, leaving deep imprints in the soil. But there was no sign of Farid. No blood, no tracks leading away. Just a quiet, overwhelming emptiness. As if the forest had swallowed him whole. The search party returned that evening, their faces pale, their voices hushed. No one said it aloud, but they all knew. Farid was gone. And whatever had taken him was still out there. That night, the village elders gathered. These were men who had seen war, who had lived long enough to know the land better than they knew themselves. They spoke of old legends, stories buried beneath time. Hamid was among them, listening closely as the oldest man in the village, Baba Noor, leaned forward and whispered a name no one had spoken in years. The guardian of the forgotten. It was an ancient tale, older than any living memory. The legend spoke of a being that walked the mountains long before men settled in the valleys. A creature neither spirit nor beast, bound to the land, its purpose unknown. Some believed it was a protector, keeping the balance between the natural and the unnatural. Others claimed it was something far worse, a keeper of lost things, a being that took those who strayed too far into the unknown. It was never meant to be seen, Baba Noor murmured, his wrinkled hands gripping his cane. And those who do, never return. The room fell silent. The villagers knew that stories often held pieces of truth, warnings hidden in the words of the past. But none of them had ever believed they would find themselves living in one. That same night, another traveler went missing. A man named Saeed, a hunter who had left before dawn, never made it back. He was skilled, experienced, and had spent years in these mountains. But as the sun set and his family waited for his return, only an eerie quiet filled the village. By morning, his brother and a few others went looking for him. They followed the usual hunting trails, searching for any sign of movement, any clue that might explain his disappearance. Then they found his rifle. It was lying in the middle of an open clearing, half buried in the dirt, as if it had been dropped mid-stride. The strange part was that there were no footprints leading to or away from it. Just undisturbed earth, as though Saeed had vanished into thin air. The fear became impossible to ignore. The villagers stopped going into the woods altogether. Travelers avoided the area, taking longer, more difficult routes just to stay away from the shadow of the mountains. Even the animals seemed to sense something was wrong. Dogs refused to leave their homes at night, cattle grew restless, the birds no longer sang at dawn. Then came the whispering. At first, only a few people claimed to hear it, soft voices drifting through the wind, speaking in a language no one understood. But as the nights grew longer, the whispers became more frequent. Some said they heard their own names being called. Others spoke of dreams, visions of endless darkness, of glowing red eyes watching from the void. Bilal, the merchant who had first seen the creature, was the worst affected. He had been trying to leave ever since his encounter, but each time he set out, something stopped him. A fallen tree blocking the road, a sudden storm forcing him to turn back, an overwhelming sickness striking him before he could step beyond the village. It was as if something wanted him to stay. One night, he woke up gasping for air, his chest tight with terror. In his dreams, he had seen the red-eyed giant standing at the edge of his bed, watching him. But the worst part wasn't the creature's presence. It was the feeling that it was waiting for what he didn't know. The fear spread beyond Kunar. Other villages began to hear the stories, whispers reaching distant towns. Some called it superstition, the mind playing tricks in the dark. Others, especially those who had heard the old tales before, weren't so quick to dismiss it. Among them was a man named Idris, a scholar who had spent years studying folklore and lost histories. He had heard about the legend of the guardian of the forgotten before, but he had always assumed it was just that, a legend. But now, with multiple disappearances, first-hand accounts, and a growing sense of unease, he wasn't so sure. Determined to find answers, he set out for Kunar, traveling through the winding roads that led deep into the mountains. When he arrived, he found a village on edge. The people barely spoke, their eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Doors were locked before sunset, and no one dared step outside after dark. Idris spent days speaking with the villagers, gathering their accounts, mapping out the locations where people had vanished. He pored over old texts, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. Then, one evening, as he sat by candlelight flipping through the pages of an ancient manuscript, he found something that made his blood run cold. It was a passage describing the guardian, not as a mere legend, but as something real, something witnessed by those who came before. The text spoke of its nature, its presence tied to the land, its purpose unknown. But it was the final line that sent a chill down his spine. It does not take the lost. It takes those who have seen it. Idris stared at the words, the flickering light casting shifting shadows across the page. If this was true, it meant the disappearances weren't random. The creature wasn't hunting just anyone. It was taking those who had looked into its burning red eyes. And that meant everyone who had seen it was still in danger, including him. As Idris sat there, realization washing over him, the wind outside changed. It carried something new now, a deep, low whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. It seeped through the cracks in the walls, curled around the candle flame. Voice. And it was calling his name. The whispering didn't stop. Idris sat frozen, his fingers gripping the old manuscript as the candle's flame flickered wildly, casting long shadows against the walls. The voice was neither loud nor clear, yet he felt it inside his head, as if something ancient and unseen was pressing into his thoughts. It was his name, drawn out, stretched into the night air like a breath from something just beyond the edges of reality. He forced himself to stand, his legs unsteady beneath him. The room felt smaller, the darkness thicker. The candle barely provided enough light to push back the overwhelming blackness creeping in from the corners. He turned toward the window, heart pounding, pulse roaring in his ears. Outside, the village lay silent. Not the peaceful quiet of sleeping homes, but an unnatural stillness, as though everything, every tree, every stone, every living thing was holding its breath. Then he saw it. At the far end of the village, near the forest's edge, two burning red eyes stared back at him. They didn't blink, didn't shift. Just watched. A sharp knock at the door made him spin around, the manuscript slipping from his hands and landing on the wooden floor with a soft thud. He swallowed hard, his breath uneven. No one was supposed to be out this late. Another knock. Slow, deliberate. Idris stepped forward, his hand hovering over the door handle. "Who is it?" His voice barely sounded like his own. Silence. Then a whisper right on the other side of the door. "You were not supposed to see." Every muscle in his body tensed. His fingers trembled over the handle, but he didn't dare open it. Instead, he backed away, reaching for the lantern, ready to throw it if needed. His mind raced through everything he had read, everything he had been told. The creature, whatever it was, did not hunt at random, took those who had seen it. And now it was here for him. The knock came again, harder this time. Then, without warning, the candle blew out. The room plunged into darkness. A chill crawled down his spine, the air thick with something unseen. He forced himself to move, feeling his way along the wall, searching for anything. His bag, his lantern, even the old book he had dropped. But before he could grasp anything, the whisper came again, this time from inside the room. "You were not supposed to see." A cold breath touched the back of his neck. Idris bolted. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He just ran. Bursting through the door, he stumbled into the empty village streets, his pulse hammering in his ears. He turned toward the forest's edge, expecting to see the red-eyed figure standing there. But it was gone. The village remained deathly quiet. The only sound was his own ragged breathing as he backed away. His mind spinning. He needed to get out. Without looking back, he sprinted toward Hamid's house, nearly tripping over loose stones as his heart pounded against his ribs. He didn't care if he woke the entire village. He needed to warn them. He banged on the old wooden door, his hands shaking. "Hamid, open the door." A moment passed, then another. Just as panic began to tighten around his chest, the door creaked open, revealing the old man. His eyes filled with confusion and exhaustion. "Idris." Hamid's voice was rough from sleep. "What's wrong?" Idris pushed past him, slamming the door shut behind him. "It's here," he gasped. "The red-eyed giant. I saw it. It came to my door." Hamid's face darkened. He didn't ask if Idris was sure. He didn't need to. Instead, he turned, calling out to his grandson, who appeared moments later with an oil lamp in hand. "We don't have much time," Hamid said, his voice steady but grave. "It knows you've seen it. That means you can't stay here." Idris wiped a hand across his face, trying to gather his thoughts. "Then where do I go?" Hamid hesitated. He looked at his grandson, then back at Idris. "There's only one place left," he finally said. "The Black Valley." The name sent a chill through Idris. He had read about it, an unmarked stretch of land deep within the mountains, shrouded in mist, abandoned for centuries. No one went there. The stories claimed it was cursed, that those who entered never returned. But Hamid was already moving, grabbing a satchel, stuffing it with supplies. "It's the only place where it might not follow," he said. "It's where the first stories began." Idris shook his head. "You want me to run toward the place where this thing comes from?" Hamid stopped, his eyes locking onto Idris with an intensity that made his stomach twist. "No," he said. "I want you to find out what it is." The words hit like a stone in his chest. Idris had spent his life searching for truths buried in legends, but now, faced with the reality of something beyond human understanding, he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Outside, the wind shifted. A whisper, barely carried on the breeze, curled through the cracks in the door. It was closer now. Hamid's grandson handed Idris a small blade, his expression grim. "You'll need this," he said. Idris took it, his grip unsteady. "A knife isn't going to stop something like that." Hamid met his gaze. "Then don't let it catch you." A distant sound echoed through the village, a low, guttural breath, deep enough to make the ground tremble. Idris exhaled sharply. He had no choice. With one last glance at Hamid, he turned and ran into the night, toward the Black Valley. And behind him, just beyond the village, the red eyes flickered in the dark. Watching. Waiting. Idris ran. The night air was thick, heavy with something unspoken, something unseen. The wind carried whispers, curling through the trees like fingers grasping at his clothes. He didn't dare look back. He knew it was there, watching, waiting. His feet pounded against the dirt path leading out of the village, his breath sharp and uneven. The black valley lay ahead, hidden in the shadows of the mountains, a place where no one dared to go. He had spent years studying myths and legends, chasing the ghosts of stories long forgotten. But now, for the first time, he felt like he had stepped into one. The path narrowed, the trees growing denser as the village lights faded behind him. He clutched the small blade Hamid's grandson had given him, though he knew it would do little against whatever was hunting him. The stories never mentioned anyone surviving an encounter with the red-eyed giant. They only spoke of those who vanished. Then, without warning, the wind stopped. Everything went still. No rustling leaves, no distant animal sounds, just a thick, suffocating silence. Idris slowed his steps, his pulse hammering in his ears. It was too quiet. That's when he saw it. Not the creature. Something else. In the darkness ahead, just beyond the trees, stood a figure. Not towering, not monstrous, human. Man. Idris's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. The man stood perfectly still, half shrouded by the trees. His clothes were worn, his face obscured by the night, but something about him felt wrong, like he didn't belong there. Idris took a hesitant step forward. "Who are you?" The man didn't move. The stillness pressed in around him, the silence unnatural, almost deafening. Idris swallowed hard, his instincts screaming for him to run. But something about the figure, something familiar, kept him frozen in place. Then the man took a step forward, into the dim light of the moon. Idris staggered back, his heart slamming against his ribs. It was Farid, the same Farid who had disappeared, the same Farid they had searched for. But something was wrong. His face was pale, his eyes hollow like he had been drained of life. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Only a whisper. "You weren't supposed to see." The same words. The same chilling phrase spoken at his door. Idris felt his grip tighten around the knife. "Farid." His voice cracked. "Is that you?" Farid didn't answer. His lips moved, but no sound followed. Instead, his body shifted, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to something Idris couldn't hear. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and pointed behind Idris. Idris felt the cold breath on his neck before he even turned. His body reacted before his mind could process it. He ducked, spinning just in time to see a massive shadow moving through the trees, red eyes burning in the darkness. A deep, guttural sound rumbled through the air, a presence so overwhelming it made his knees nearly buckle. He ran. Branches clawed at his arms, roots threatened to trip him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The black valley was close. He could feel the land changing beneath his feet, the air becoming heavier. But so was it. The sound of something impossibly large crashing through the trees behind him sent a jolt of terror through his chest. He didn't dare look back. He had seen enough. And then silence. Idris skidded to a stop, his breath ragged. No movement, no growling, just quiet. Too quiet. He turned slowly, expecting to see glowing red eyes in the distance. But there was nothing. The trees stood still, the darkness undisturbed. The presence was gone. But Farid was still there. Idris's chest rose and fell rapidly as he watched his friend, who hadn't moved an inch. His lifeless eyes were still fixed on him, his expression unreadable. Then, in the eerie silence, Farid whispered something new. Something that sent ice through Idris's veins. "You were never supposed to come here." The ground beneath Idris shifted. A deep, resonating sound, like the earth itself exhaling, echoed through the valley. The trees trembled. The shadows stretched unnaturally. Something was waking up. Idris stumbled back, realization slamming into him. The red-eyed giant wasn't the only thing in these mountains. There was something worse. Something buried beneath the valley. And he had just stepped into its domain. Idris barely had time to react before the ground beneath him shuddered. A deep, resonant sound pulsed through the air, low and unnatural, like something ancient stirring from its slumber. The trees trembled, the very air thickening as the darkness around him deepened. It wasn't just the red-eyed giant he had to fear anymore. Something far worse was waking beneath the valley. Farid remained frozen. His hollow eyes locked onto Idris. He didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, pointing downward. His mouth slightly open as though caught between a scream and silence. The earth trembled again, harder this time. Idris staggered, nearly losing his balance as cracks began to form in the ground beneath his feet. A gust of wind roared through the valley, carrying whispers, dozens of them, overlapping, twisting, growing louder. Idris clutched his head, the voices pressing into his skull. "You were never supposed to come here." Farid's voice echoed through the chaos, but it wasn't his alone. It was many voices, blending together, coming from everywhere. Idris's stomach twisted. He had read about this, about the valley's curse, about those who entered never returning. The legends never said they died. They simply became part of it. Panic surged through his chest. He had to get out. Then the shadows moved. Not the trees, not the wind, something else. Something massive rising from beneath the valley floor. Idris felt the shift before he saw it, the air vibrating with an unnatural energy. He turned, his breath catching as the cracks in the earth widened, revealing a darkness deeper than night itself. From that abyss, two enormous red eyes opened. But they weren't the same as before. They were larger, older, burning with something beyond rage. Something Idris couldn't comprehend. A deep growl rolled through the valley, shaking the very ground he stood on. The red-eyed giant wasn't just a creature. It was a guardian. And something worse was trying to escape. Idris's mind raced. The stories had warned about the giant. But what if they had it wrong? What if it wasn't hunting people, but protecting them? The disappearances, the whispers, the fear. It wasn't because of the giant itself. It was because of what it was keeping trapped beneath the valley. And now, because of Idris, the seal was breaking. Farid's figure flickered, his edges blurring like smoke caught in the wind. He was fading. No, not fading, being pulled back. Idris watched in horror as his friend's form twisted. His mouth still open, the silent scream still there. Then, in a sudden snap, he was gone. The valley roared. A force unlike anything Idris had ever felt surged through the ground, through his bones. The darkness from below was spreading, seeping through the cracks, reaching for him. He stumbled backward, but the force was too strong. The valley itself was collapsing. Then, through the chaos, through the howling wind, he saw it. The red-eyed giant. It was standing at the edge of the valley now, its towering form outlined against the night sky. But it wasn't coming for him. It was facing the darkness, the burning red eyes locked onto the abyss below. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in a language Idris understood, but in a sound that reverberated through his soul. It was a command, a warning. Final stand. The shadows lashed out. The giant moved faster than Idris thought possible, slamming its massive arms into the cracks, pushing against the force trying to escape. The ground beneath them groaned, resisting, fighting. The wind howled louder, the whispers shrieking in protest. The battle between light and dark, between guardian and prisoner, was reaching its peak. Idris had to make a choice. If he stayed, he would be swallowed by whatever was trying to break free. But if he ran, if he left the valley now, would he be abandoning the only thing holding it back? The giant turned its head slightly, just for a second. Not to attack, not to chase, but to look at him. An understanding passed between them. Idris didn't need to fight. He needed to leave. He turned and ran. The valley roared behind him, the sound shaking the mountains, shaking the sky. The moment he crossed the tree line, an explosion of wind nearly knocked him off his feet. He fell, rolling across the dirt, his ears ringing, his lungs gasping for air. Then silence. He looked back. The valley was gone. Not destroyed. Not in ruins. Just gone. As if it had never been there. The trees stood where they hadn't before, the cracks sealed, the earth untouched. The only sign that anything had happened was the faintest glow of red light deep in the distance. Before it, too, disappeared. Idris lay there, staring, trying to understand. But he knew he never truly would. Some things weren't meant to be understood. He had seen something no one else had. Something no one else ever would. And he knew one thing for certain. The giant hadn't been hunting him. It had saved him. But if the valley had tried to open once, could happen again. And next time there might not be anything left to stop it. Idris sat on the cold ground, staring at the empty valley. His breath was still uneven, his body shaking, but not just from exhaustion. It was the weight of what he had seen, what he had almost unleashed. He had spent years chasing stories, but never had he imagined being caught inside one. The legends were true, but they had told the story all wrong. The red-eyed giant wasn't a monster. It was a guardian, a force standing between the world of men and something far worse. It had stopped something Idris couldn't name, couldn't fully comprehend. And yet, the valley had erased itself, as if covering its own scars. As if it knew that humans would always come looking for answers they were never meant to find. His heart was still hammering in his chest, but the world around him had returned to an eerie stillness. The wind had stopped, the trees no longer swayed, and the whispers, those terrifying bone-chilling voices, were gone. Only silence remained. Idris forced himself to stand. His legs weak beneath him. He needed to leave. He needed to go home. As he made his way back through the woods, every step felt surreal, as if he were waking from a nightmare. But it wasn't a dream. His torn clothes, the dirt on his hands, the pounding in his head, they were real. And so was the memory of Farid. He stopped mid-step, his throat tightening. Farid was gone. Not just missing. Not just lost. Gone in a way that no one would ever understand. He had become part of the valley, swallowed by whatever force had claimed so many before him. Would anyone believe Idris if he told them that his friend had stood there, hollow-eyed, speaking in a voice that was not his own? That he had been taken? A cold realization settled in his chest. Maybe that was why the stories always ended with people vanishing. The valley didn't just claim them, it changed them. And when it was done, it erased itself, leaving no trace, no evidence. Only silence. He stumbled back to the village, every familiar sight feeling distant, unreal. The warm glow of lanterns, the distant sound of voices, things that should have comforted him only made him feel more out of place. He had crossed into something ancient, something forbidden, and now he had returned to a world that didn't want to know what existed beyond those trees. As he stepped onto the main road, an old man sitting outside his home glanced up. Hamid, the village elder who had first warned him about the valley. The moment their eyes met, Hamid's face darkened. He didn't ask where Idris had been. He didn't need to. You saw it, didn't you? His voice was low, cautious, as if afraid to say too much. Idris swallowed, his mouth dry. It's real. Hamid sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I know. His eyes, heavy with something deeper than age, flickered with understanding. And now you know why we never go there. Idris wanted to ask 100 questions, but he didn't. He could see in Hamid's face that the man had already made peace with knowing nothing more than what was necessary. That was the difference between them. Idris had always needed more. But now, standing there, feeling the weight of what he had barely escaped, he wasn't sure if more was worth it. Hamid exhaled slowly. Did you find your friend? A lump formed in Idris's throat. He shook his head. Farid is gone. Hamid nodded solemnly, as if he had expected that answer. Then the valley has closed for now. He looked past Idris toward the distant mountains. But it always comes back. The word sent a chill down Idris's spine. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down he knew it was true. The valley wasn't gone forever. It was only waiting. That night, Idris sat alone in his small room, staring at his notebook. The same one filled with years of research, myths, legends. Pages and pages of speculation, theories, trying to piece together something that had never truly belonged to human understanding. And now, for the first time, he had real answers. He had proof. But as he held his pen, ready to write, he hesitated. Some stories weren't meant to be told. He closed the notebook and set it aside. The world didn't need to know about the valley. Some things were better left forgotten. He had seen the price of curiosity, the cost of chasing what wasn't meant to be found. He would remember always. But he would not speak of it again. The next morning, before the village woke, Idris packed his bag and left. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. As he walked down the empty road, he cast one last glance toward the mountains. The valley was gone. The giant was gone. But something in Idris told him that one day, somewhere, the red eyes would return. And when they did, he only hoped that no one would be there to see them.